Well, good morning. And it is an honor for me to participate in this morning's symposium. A special thank you again to Deborah, Sue, and Vanessa for all of the work that you've put into making this happen. And a thank you to my fellow panelists for putting up with me. I wanted to spend a few minutes this morning talking about how I approach singing as a singing coach, but I want to get there with a brief tour through my vocal journey. And I mean brief. It's only going to take about 2 minutes for this part of the story. But I started singing when I was 18 months old, or at least that's what my mother has told me. She claims that around that age, I began singing myself to sleep, and they simply couldn't stop me from singing after that point. Singing, like for many of you, singing has always been a significant part of my life and of my identity. But it has not always been a particularly joyful or fulfilling part of my life and identity. Like every singer here, I have encountered many challenges and setbacks with my voice over the years. Through the earth-shattering shifts of adolescence, a 10-year battle with severe acid reflux, and quite a few other unrelated issues with my singing technique in general. As I was young and coming toward college and thinking toward graduate school, I was increasingly determined to figure out how the voice really worked so that singing could be as fun for me now as it had been when I was a kid before I had all those issues. So really, this started as a selfish endeavor for me. But as I studied singing and as I grew as a singer, it became clear to me that I was put in this world to make singing simple for other people. So rather than dwelling on the minutia of particular styles of singing, classical, barbershop, or otherwise, I felt that I needed to be a generalist who focused on the fundamentals of singing in straightforward, easy-to-understand language. And what does that look like? Well, sure, we can do deep dives. I do deep dives into artistry, into stylistic minutiae, the technical, little itty-bitty technical things that advanced students need. But most of the time, what this looks like when people work with me is rather than focusing on sheer information or the way that you sound, I have my clients focus on the physical sensations of healthy vocal technique. And that serves them very importantly in two ways. First, they gain physical self-awareness that they might not have had before, that allows them to self-assess their own performances in the moment. And that self-assessment also allows them to practice more intelligently, but with confidence that they're doing things the way they really want to. They also find it easier to build healthier new singing habits quickly because sensation is a better self-assessment tool in real time than sound ever could be. But it also comes to play in a more strategic way. It's not just the day-to-day experience of how we go about becoming better singers and better versions of ourselves. Stephen Covey famously said that the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And so when I teach, since I really strive to be a generalist, I specialize on the generalities, I rely on a prioritized structure to make sure that we are always working on what is most important to the singer's current struggles, current experiences, and current successes. And I would like to spend the rest of my time sharing that structure with you. So if you'll bear with me for a moment, I am going to share part of my screen. There we go. So if you're looking at this, you can tell I am not a graphics designer. So I want you to engage your imagination as we look at this stack of blue rectangles, and I want you to pretend with me that this is a stack of blocks. Now, these are not like Legos or any sort of interconnecting blocks. They're just plain rectangular blocks that a small child might build a tower out of. The way that I think about singing is prioritized in this order, where the bottom is the most fundamental part of singing, and thus the biggest block. And as we go further up the list, these things are not less important, but they are less fundamental. And what I mean by that is, the way that you think about singing influences the way that you stand and you sit. It influences the way that you breathe. It influences the tensions that you have in your body, and it influences your ability to express the meaning of songs in powerful ways. And if you look at it the other way, the way that you breathe does not necessarily influence the way that you think about singing. The way that you hold tensions in your body does not necessarily inform the way that you stand. The way that you stand certainly influences the way that you breathe, or the way that you hold tensions in your body. And so what I do when I think about singing is I put things in this priority. Most of the time, when people come to me, they have some sort of vocal issue that they are struggling with. More often than not, if we start going from mindset and work our way from most fundamental aspect of singing on up the list, we find the solution very quickly, and they can either come back for more lessons or go on their merry way, having confidence that they were able to figure out their own issue with a little bit of guidance. So one thing that I do want to point out before we dive into these individual areas of singing is that you could put this tower in a different order. If you build a building of blocks, and I've done this with my son before with his blocks, you don't have to put the biggest block on the bottom. You could put in this case, in my design of this tower, you could put expression on the bottom and invert the tower completely, and the tower would still stand. So it's not that there is one right way to sing or teach singing. But in my experience, putting things in this order gives us the ability to work a little faster and encounter fewer frustrations as we work through whatever we're working through. And I think of that similarly to the blocks. If you inverted this tower, it would still stand. It just might be a little less stable, a little more prone to falling over. And so what I would like to do now is let's take a brief walk through these 5 fundamental areas of singing. Some of which, this first rung of singing, where we talk about mindset, how you think about your voice and what it does, and how your body works while you sing. We actually talked about this some already in the opening panel discussion, which was kind of cool to hear how so many of our ideas aligned. Part of what we talk about when we work on the mindset of singing is sensation over sound, which I already mentioned. We have talked about, and I've heard other people in this panel already echo, that the way singing feels is much more important than the way the sound comes across the airwaves. Now, as a generalist, as someone who likes to work singing technique with people, the way that comes into play is I ask people to ignore the way they sound as much as they can, and instead focus on how singing feels. But I do that for a slightly different reason, because when you listen to yourself while you sing, you don't get an accurate representation of the sounds that are coming out of you anyway. The sympathetic vibrations of your voice come through your body and create a dampened, usually darker, fuller version of the tone that's actually happening out in the world around you. Whereas if you put a high-quality microphone or even a medium-quality microphone in front of you, recorded yourself singing, and played it back, you would have a far more reliable tool for assessing what you're doing. But if we focus on sensation, a few really important things happen. First, we start to get out of our heads. We stop worrying about, oh, did that sound right? Oh, I hope such and such a thing was just the way I was hoping. Instead, we can zoom out a little bit and say, well, how did it feel? And how can I make it feel better? Most of the people that I encounter who come to me for coaching either have some vocal feat that they are trying to accomplish that they are having trouble with, or singing simply doesn't feel good. In either case, it's usually a lack of vocal freedom. If we step back and say, well, how does singing feel and how can I make it feel better? We can very quickly start to gauge the freedom of our voices in a way that we might not if we were simply relying on sound. And it allows you, the singer, to self-coach much more effectively when we are not together and working together. So I've said a couple of times, how do I make singing feel better? Well, there are a couple of key emphases for better, because that's pretty subjective. Not that we want to get super specific and measurable with everything we do in singing. We don't want to overthink. But the two questions that I ask to easier, that is, how can I expend less physical effort? And how can I make singing feel more comfortable? How can I experience less tension, less pinching, less tightness anywhere you may be experiencing it in your body? So if you turn your attention to the way singing feels rather than the way singing sounds, you're very likely going to free up your voice and start making new breakthroughs, new progress, and most importantly, enjoy singing more than you have been. Another thing that we need to acknowledge when we talk about mindset is that your voice as a singer is inherently valuable, regardless of what it sounds like. There is not another singer in this world with the exact same combination of voice and mind that you have. And that means something really cool. That means that you have a truly unique gift to share. And I do believe singing, although it is fun and fulfilling to sing for yourself, I do believe singing is something that we were made to share with other people. But it's very easy for us to get into this sort of comparison paralysis game where we say, I don't sing as well as insert your favorite barbershop singer or non-barbershop singer. I can't do X like they do. I can't do X like I wish I could, even if you're not looking at somebody else. We're comparing ourselves to an ideal, a fake ideal of ourselves. But if instead we say, wait a minute, my voice is valuable. There is not another person that can sing this song or this exercise or this story exactly the way that I can. So I can share part of my experience and part of what I feel and part of who I am with other people, and that is valuable regardless of how good or bad or whatever you want, whatever descriptor you want to use, my technique may be. And it also brings up, again, that there is not necessarily an incorrect way to sing. The fact that that you do not sound like me as a singer is neither good nor bad. Well, it's a little bit good because that means we have the unique gift and we don't have a shared gift. We have a unique gift that we can share with the world. But it starts to bring the idea that because your voice is valuable, because you have a unique gift, you do not have to wait to share that. You don't need to reach a certain expertise, a certain amount of social prowess to share that gift. The sounds that you make are valid and beautiful because they're the ones that you're making. Finally,
about 5 minutes, Ben.
All right.
Till Q&A.
Sounds great. And then finally, we like to approach singing like a puzzle. I ask lots of questions. I invite my people to experiment. There's an inherent playfulness, curiosity, and just general non-judgmental observation, not just by me, but by the people I work with, where I say, hey, do you notice that such and such happens? It's not a, oh, you did that, don't do that. Do you notice how? What happens if we do? That kind of open curiosity where we're not forcing ourselves into a certain technical box is recipe for explosive growth. Now let me quickly walk through the rest of these with the few minutes I have left. Sorry, I just saw. Oh, it was just something in the chat. Okay. So, form. The way that we stand and sit. A lot of people call this stance or posture. There's nothing inherently wrong with calling it those. I like to choose form because it has this connotation of being ready and free to move, where stance and posture have some connotations of rigidity and stiffness. Not that we can't explain that away. I just think form reinforces that singing is an art form of movement. You cannot sing without being free, and the freer your body is to move, the more fun you have, the more fulfillment you will have as a singer. This all goes down to being comfortable, being balanced, being aligned, and a lot of these are buzzwords, which we would define more specifically if we got to work together. Breathing, I do want to spend 1 minute on here because this is where I see most people have significant issues, because we as barbershoppers tend to use excess breath pressure when we sing. We push with our abs, we collapse our chest, push on that air to get the sound out, specifically for high or loud singing, which we like to do. So what I like to work with people on is helping those areas of your body relax and expand. And you find that your voice naturally relaxes because we no longer need to add tension in our throat to keep our voice safe from this excess breath pressure. So just by relaxing the way you breathe and the way you stand, you gain vocal freedom. Relaxation, tension is contagious. So even if you're standing and breathing perfectly, if there is one right way, right? If you're breathing and standing perfectly, you're still going to have some tension hiding somewhere that you don't need. And so then we dive in and we say, well, where is it? Let's use exercises to find where there's tension hiding and then systematically relax it away with exercises that I'm sure everyone on this panel is familiar with. There are so many reliable, time-tested exercises. And then finally, expression. Once we get up to here, this is where the real fun happens. Not that progress through these others isn't fun, but we get to dive in and say, what tools as singers do we use too frequently and thus lose meaning from? I'm sure you have encountered someone who swears constantly, and it's meaningless. It's filler words. But if you encounter someone who you've never heard swear and they swear, all of a sudden that word means a lot, and you go, whoa. We want to make sure that when we are expressive in our singing, we use tools sparingly and intentionally so that when we are using them, they mean more. And we find that, what I like to do is make a big list of what tools are at our disposal and then systematically go through and look at a chart, look at a song you're working on, and let's go through and fine-comb. When am I going to use each one? It's a little tedious. It's a little exact. But it's a way to start getting in that framework of how do I sing as expressively as possible without compromising any of the relaxation or comfort or fun that I'm having when I'm singing this song. So I believe we are just probably within a minute of questions. So before we dive into those, I want to say thank you so much to all of you for your attention and time. And if after this weekend you decide you'd like to pursue lessons or group coaching with me, I would be delighted and honored to work with any one of you and your voices. You can shoot me messages on Facebook, email, check out my website, singworthy.com. But thank you so much. And I believe now at a point where we can take some questions.
Sounds great, Ben. Great presentation.
Thank you very much.
We have a bunch of really great questions here. First is, what's an example of an exercise to find tension?
My favorite exercise to find tension, well, if we're talking whole body here, my favorite is to have a person lay down on a bed or a very comfortable recliner, something that really cradles their body, and just lay there. Just lay there. Let all the tension melt out of your body. Then, without making yourself move any special way, take as relaxed a breath as you can and try to sing a couple notes. Invariably, you will find a few muscles engage in places of your body that you weren't really expecting. Just pack that away. Note where that is and relax it away, try again. And sometimes you may find one muscle. Sometimes you may find 15 muscles. It really doesn't matter what you find, except that gives you a little clarity on what is grabbing. If you don't want to go quite that deep, there are also things like, say, a very common tension is tongue tension. What you could do is sing while either lightly pinching or lightly biting the tip of your tongue. And if you feel it try to pull back into your mouth while you sing, that's an indication that you tend to sing with a little excess tension there. There are many more examples, but we'll stop with that for now.
Another question, does your approach change depending on if you have a right-brained or left-brained student?
Well, we have to keep in mind that this is a very human endeavor. So my approach going through this list does not change. The way I conduct conversations very much would change. It's just like when if I have a conversation with Deborah versus a conversation with Kai versus a conversation with Nikki, the words that we choose, the way that we interact with one another is going to very slightly change just because we're feeding off of each other's energy. So if I bring a concept forward and I get the deer in the headlights look, which doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I know, okay, we're going to approach it from this other way and see what that works. So part of that just comes from having a wealth of different ways to approach things. And a lot of what I teach is not so much explaining as much as it is feeling, like I just explained with finding tension, the sensation of your tongue pulling back, the sensation of what's going on in your body. I don't know that that necessarily supersedes right and left brain, but it seems to work very well for most, if not all, people that I encounter.
How would you approach body stance for people with back issues or ailments that will not allow them to stand completely upright?
The name of the game is comfort. What I would encourage you to do is seek to balance as well as you can on your feet. I usually work people through a concept called the foot tripod, which just make sure you understand how the bony structure of your foot is built, to balance on that. But after that, I would be looking for the way that you can stand where the highest number of muscles relax with the least amount of discomfort for you. Nobody stands perfectly, even if they're in perfect health. So the fact that you have if you have back issues, that does not mean that you officially don't get to sing well and you have to resign yourself to be a second-rate singer for the rest of your career. Not at all. The goal is to find as comfortable as a way to stand as you can. Depending on your range of movement, you may be able to do something like a bend and stack where you drape over forward and slowly roll up. That's wildly painful for you. And so we need to find another way to make things happen well for you. But the main thing that I would encourage you to look at is if your back is causing issues, see to what extent you can still keep your ears centered over your shoulders so that your neck can still relax even if your back wants to cause problems, because that will really go a long way to keep your voice relaxed as well if we can keep everything shoulders up free, even if we have some issues further down.
Great. And in 1 minute left, could you give an example of having expression not interfere with tension?
Of course. So a lot of the ways that we tend to try to express emotion through song rely on volume or dynamics and the emphasis of consonants. These things are not inherently bad in any way, but a lot of us have the habit of over-singing when we do dynamics. When we crescendo, we tend to crescendo by pushing on the air rather than through greater relaxation and seeking a greater resonance space. And so, what I have found as I've been studying the way we express song, dynamics in particular are a very poor conveyor of emotion. The tone of your voice can be very expressive. The way that you pronounce words can be very expressive. But one way that we can express very meaningful words without adding any tension to your vocal process is to lengthen the voiced consonants of the words you're singing. So if you're singing the word love, if you dwell on the L a little longer, the word tends to mean more. So if you sing, I love you, something like that, that didn't mean anything. I didn't voice consonant. But if I say, I love, hear how I'm doing tonal things with my voice too, but you hear how lengthening that L meant something. I love. And there you could do that with M's, N's, V's, pick your voiced consonant. But that is a very effective way to add meaning to a particular word that you want to emphasize, and it requires no tension in your vocal process.
Thank you so much, Ben. Awesome job. And we
Thank
hope
you.
to see you soon in the roundtable.
Thank you very much. Happy singing, my friends.